Hello and welcome to the Second Clutter Conversation podcast. I'm your moderator, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Our topic today is, let me read it, hand-me-downs, inheriting clutter, and avoiding a clutter legacy of your own. We're glad you could come and talk to us today about this. So the topic today is hand-me-downs, inheriting clutter, and avoiding a clutter legacy of your own. The reason that we wanted to talk about this is because so many of my clients are drowning in inheriting all of their relatives, parents, aunts, and uncles, and if you're the last one standing, God help you, then you've inherited the whole previous generation across, and you end up with a bunch of stuff coming into your house. We inherit everything, and suddenly you have an entire house full of stuff that you're trying to bring into your own house, and you can't shove one whole household into another household and make it all fit without a crowbar and not being able to move around anymore. So you really do have to let go of stuff, relocate stuff, move things on to someone else. And on the converse of that, if you are reaching that time in your life where someone is about to inherit your stuff, then you need to do your best to thin that herd a little bit for somebody else so that they don't have as big of a job on the other end as well. So we were going to talk about a couple of categories from both of those standpoints. You inherited it, and you're going to pass it on to somebody else. And the first category is family photos. So if you're inheriting a bunch of family photos, like I did, when my mother passed away, my lovely sister snuck several boxes of family photos onto the moving truck that came to my house so that I was left with several boxes of photos to go through. Big boxes, like under bed boxes full of photos. And she was like, yeah, I don't really want to deal with, let's just ship this to Gayle. So we ended up with a lifetime collection of my mother's photos in my house for me to go through. And the best thing I can say about that is we take a lot of photos for things that are meaningful to us, but by the time you hand those photos down to the next person, they don't really know what's going on or what they're about. So the photos that were important to me that my mother had taken were the ones that actually had my mother in them. And when I started going through those photos, there was a huge amount of mother took a picture of the landscape, and here's a picture of some sheep, and here was the pictures of the flowers, and here's the pictures of the, random castle and random church. And those were not what was important to me out of those photos. What I wanted was pictures of her and members of our family, and interactions of the people. And so we were able to thin down the collection vastly just by going through and throwing away the things that were not people related. And it got rid of 90% of it because apparently my mother was behind the camera a lot and not in front of the camera very much at all. So she just went on about her business and kept taking pictures of the landscape and the sheep. And we got rid of a whole bunch that way. So the advice of, if you inherit a bunch of photos, first go through them and recycle all the stuff that is not important to you in terms of landscape and random environments, and here's a building and here's a person that you don't know. Even the people that you don't know, if they're friends and you don't know who they are, those are people that can go away. If you want pictures of your family and friends that you know, and pets might be included in that. I wanted pictures of mother's cats because we had to give them away to people. But once you inherit a big old wad of photos, you can sit and flip through them and reduce them just by recycling the ones that are not people and pets that you care about. And now you're going to inherit some that are genealogy related. Here's several generations back of photos, and those photos, hopefully your relative that you inherited from identified them. But if you can identify them, you may have to reach out to some other family members and see if they know who they are. But usually that collection of photos is much smaller. The stuff that's 3 generations old, 4 generations old, from the 1800s, you're going to end up with a little bit from that. The bulk of the photos are going to be things that your relative took in their lifetime that you can filter out and make less of a problem for you. If you're preferring for other people, like you have a whole bunch of photographs and you're going to send them on, then that's how you can filter them on their behalf. Go through and take out anything that is, you went on a trip to Paris and took a picture of a cathedral. Who cares? There's better photographs of that cathedral. So you want to identify the people that you know so that the person that gets them can tell, and do it with an archival pen. You can go out on the internet and buy an archival pen so that the ink, the acid in the ink doesn't deteriorate the photograph over time. You don't want to just write on it with a random pen or pencil or Sharpie. You want to go get an archival pen and then make notes on the photographs to identify the person. And filter out, my mother could have thrown away all of her pictures of sheep and flowers for me if she'd been willing to do that in advance, and it would have been helpful. The next thing is family heirlooms and furniture. Everybody ends up with a bunch of furniture that they have to disperse, and my sister and I at least were able to make choices that, she liked the antique stuff and I liked the more modern stuff, but there was still a third of the furniture that we had to send on elsewhere because it was too big for Alicia's house. It was too big for my house. It was pieces that mother really loved, but that we weren't in love with. And there's just no way that you can take an entire household of furniture and move it into your own house unless you're willing to get rid of things that are in your house now. So most people just try to move it all in. They just try to find a wall or a space to wedge it in there, and then they end up being completely overwhelmed with furniture in the house. If you like the stuff that you're inheriting better, then you got to get rid of furniture of your own to let that go on. People have trouble dispersing the furniture, and depending on what it is, it might be able to go to some kind of a furniture resale store, but there's a lot of stuff that you just have to call your family and friends and ask them if they want it. Call a Salvation Army and ask them to pick it up. Furniture is difficult to disperse, and you're going to have to put a little effort into interacting with people so that you can find somebody that wants to take it away for you. I'm having that struggle with a client right now who left a couch behind after she moved, and we're trying to get it to the person that we're giving it to, and it's been a pain. But you just have to hang in with furniture. There's no short, fast way to make it disappear unless, you have that business already. If you're preparing for others, it's best to go through the furniture and ask your family members, are there things that you want? Find out who's going to fight over something. Find out if anybody wants the piano or not, and try not to be offended if nobody wants something. Just let them make their choices and put stickers on them, go back and put their names on them and put a sticker on the back of the furniture that they've claimed or would like to claim. And then if you can release furniture as you downsize, or release furniture while you're still living in the house that nobody really wants, it might be helpful to them if you can try to move some of that stuff on now instead of after you're gone. It's one less thing they have to deal with. Furniture is a hassle, and it does require some planning and prep. And so any amount that you can, any way that you can thin that herd for somebody that's going to inherit your stuff or clean out would be awesome. If you don't have relatives, some people, you're at the end of the line and you don't have any other relatives to inherit from you, then you start asking your friends. We actually had my mother's friends come to the house, and they went through clothing and jewelry and took pieces away that reminded them of her that they could wear or use. And it didn't reduce it by a huge volume, but it did take a little bit away, and it did give people the opportunity to take things that were their favorites, and they were all friends of hers, so that if mother didn't have anybody else, her friends could have come through and selected some pieces, and that would have been lovely. If you could do that, of course, put your friend's name on it instead of your family's name on it, and let people come and take things after you're gone, that would be really helpful for whoever's clearing out your space. Let's talk about documents. So there's inheriting somebody else's paper is like the ultimate tornado nightmare. I know nobody wants to deal with their own paper, and inheriting somebody else's paper is just like the worst. So you are going to have to go through and sort somebody else's paper, which is sad and terrible. But you're wanting to separate things that are legal and financial that are important for managing the estate, records about real estate, all that kind of management paper in terms of the estate, and separate that from here's the junk mail, here's the keepsakes, here's the cards and letters, here's the photos, for instance. That's going to be some of the paper that somebody's going to be messing with. That process is usually the most time sensitive one, because you need the financial and legal documents right away. And so the other paperwork isn't as important. You have to go find that stuff. So separating between this is going to be related to the estate and this isn't going to be related, this is going to be related to shutting down the household and this isn't, making that separation first is really important. And then you're left with, here's my keepsake stuff, here's the photo pile, here's the old letters that, you know, my aunt and uncle wrote each other during the war or whatever. There's going to be all sorts of family keepsake and genealogy and history paper that doesn't have anything to do with the estate, making that separation. And then depending on how well your family member filtered their own paper, you will end up throwing away a lot of junk mail, I guess, going through their mail piles that did not get handled. And so what I say to people about paper all the time when I'm at somebody's house is the inclination is to pick up the bundle and just throw it all in the trash or throw it on the recycle. But too many times you go through 500 pieces of paper and there's 2 pieces of paper that are super important mixed in. So you really do have to touch it all before you recycle or throw it out. And you have to open things because it's going to look like it's one thing and it actually ends up being something else. And the something else is super important. So you do have to go through and open it all. And if somebody hasn't done that with their own mail, it's going to make this a very labor intensive chore. And if you're preparing for others to receive your paper, it would be really helpful if you did this filtering in advance. And mostly that you isolated here's the important paperwork related to the house and the assets from here's the rest of the mail that I haven't had time to deal with. Here's the magazines and catalogs that I haven't had time to deal with. If you just concentrate on isolating and sorting and labeling, creating files, creating a file box of important paperwork so that they don't have to go hunt it down, that would be really, really supportive and helpful for somebody that has to come behind you and do that. If paper is your nemesis, this is a place that would be really helpful for you to hire somebody to come and support you in getting through it, either as the person who has inherited the paper or the person who's going to pass on the paper. In either case, it'd be great to have somebody to help you. If this is just not your stick and you're not good at it, even if you don't spend money on an organizer anywhere else, getting an organizer to help you get through the paperwork will make your life much less painful and not as much suffering while you're trying to go through the process. I have a whole bunch of, there's always a bunch of junk mail and catalogs and magazines, and I've thrown away over my career an unbelievable amount into the recycling bin. And I just did one yesterday where it was a bag of papers that had been thrown into a box for a move in 1995. So when we were going back through it, it was really, really old stuff, and 99% of it went in the trash. And we found a couple of keepsake cards that were important, and we found 1 or 2 documents that were important. And we spent 2 hours, we got it all in the recycle bin, but it was all really, really old. And depending on how well your family member has been filtering their own paperwork, you may be going through stuff that's ancient. And having somebody to support you in that process will make it less painful for you. I am going to ask people if they would like to have questions at this point. And
Gayle, Karen had a question. So I'm not sure whether you covered it to her satisfaction. So I'm going to put Karen on the line.
Hi, Gayle.
Hi, Karen.
When you were talking about organizing the photos and how some photos don't mean as much to other people, if I were leaving my photos to my kids, how would I know which photos they might want or not want I mean, what if it was like a family trip to Disneyland and they wanted to remember that? But
Well, and so I think out of that, what's important out of that is that you're getting the photos that have all the family members in them. So as long as if you took pictures of your niece and nephew and with Mickey, they're standing around taking pictures of them at Disney World, then those are the ones that have people in them. So those would stay, for instance. If you are concerned about it, then certainly you can pass them by the family as well and let them look at it. If you think that they might want to care about the list, in general, I'm just giving advice about thinning the herd so that there's not as much for them to look at. If everybody loved that Disney vacation, it was super fabulous, and you have 150 pictures because your dad was a camera nut, then you might want to go through and see, okay, well, I can thin it by the ones that are blurry, and I can thin it by the ones that are the picture of the parade or whatever. Or maybe he took 35 pictures of the parade in which none of your family members were participating, and you can cut it down to 5 really great pictures of the parade, and you can let some of the excess go. So you still have a path, you still have a chronology of the trip with not the full volume that your photo happy dad made. It's really about volume, right? So you can thin it out and still keep the evidence of the trip, is what I'm saying.
that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Mark.
Actually, I have a suggestion on that. I've been having a lot of my clients, scanners, people buy them and then don't use them.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
So, and then by the time they use them, they forgot how, or they don't work anymore, or they lost the cable, or, it's
Right.
moved a couple of times with them. And yeah. So there's these scanner apps that work surprisingly well on the phones. I've been having people scan stuff, but along the lines for the photos, you could scan photos and upload them online somewhere and make an online digital library, and then nobody has to keep actual photos.
That would be awesome. Thank you
that.
for dialing in. Appreciate that. He's right. If you are happy with a digital library, that's not going to help you with what you've inherited, but it would certainly, well, I guess it would. It would mean that you would be transferring your inherited stuff to a digital format for somebody else to look at later. And it would allow you to share with other relatives if you inherited a bunch of photos and you wanted to share them around. But it would certainly be a great thing for you to do with your own photos if you were trying to thin them out for the person that was going to get them on the back end. You can make those scans. You can make all sorts of notes. You can do all that kind of stuff and identify them a whole lot in the scan version and pass that on to somebody that's in the family that's doing genealogy if you have old photos or whatever, or make them available for the people that want to see them. One of the things that happens for me with clients is that ultimately I'm working with the last man standing. So there was a parent or a parent couple, and they made copies of everything and gave copies to all of the kids. And then all of the other kids die, and then there's one kid that's left, and they get the parent stuff and they get all the copies that the parents made, and all of those show up in one place. And so then you're dealing with this there was a moment where it all got dispersed in multiple copies, and then that still in a funnel comes down to one person. And so making it digital might help so that they're not actually printing and giving away copies of the same thing for siblings. Like imagine if your mom and dad did that and made copies of everything and sent it to all y'all, and then the last one of y'all standing is going to inherit everybody's copies of all the stuff. And so it would be a avalanche that needed to be managed, and making it digital might help that.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's probably about it for today. Let's wrap up and remind everybody that we're meeting next Tuesday at the same time, Tuesday, May 29th, 2018 at 12:01 Central Time. That's 17:01 Universal Time. And we will be talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about preparing to move.
Yes, we're talking about preparing to move, how to get ready to move, how to make that process easier for you and smoother for you so that when you get to the other end, you're not unsorting a completely scrambled house.
And
So
that meeting will be open to the general public. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you'd like to participate in next week's meeting, visit our website at clutterfairyhouston.com. You can join our mailing list there, and you can find details of that meeting and how to participate live by video, audio, or chat.
You will have to download a little software app to do it. But once you download it one time, you will never have to download it again, and then you can join our conversation.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Gayle.
If that's everything, thanks, you guys. See you later. Bye.